Good afternoon. I'll call this meeting of the Housing, Finance, and Policy Committee to order, and note we have a quorum present. Next order of business is approval of the minutes. Vice Chair Kozlowski, have you had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes, I have. Yes, Chair Howard, I have.
Representative Kozlowski moves the minutes for March 19th. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Members, we have several bills up today. I believe that we're laying most or all of them over for inclusion. And first up, we have House File 2144 for Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Chair Howard and Chair Igo, for this opportunity. I would like to move a amendment. Oh, is that correct?
First, Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley, would you like to move your bill in front of the committee?
Yes.
And then I understand, Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley, that you have the A1 amendment. Would you briefly describe the A1 amendment?
Yes, thank you so much for that opportunity to describe it. So it is basically to let's see here, appropriate $75.9 million in year 2026 and $75.45 million in fiscal year 2027 for the FHPAP program. And basically, $150 million is a new general fund appropriation that is added to the program's ongoing base funding. $900,000 in fiscal year 2026 and $450,000 in fiscal year 2027 are also appropriated from the general fund, but HF 2144 reappeals a special revenue account for housing support that currently has $900,000 in it and would have gotten another $450 transferred into it this year. So those funds in that account transfer back to the general fund, and since our appropriation uses the same amount that cancels back, this additional $1.35 million is also considered in the revenue neutral. Thank you.
Any discussion to the A1? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The A1 is adopted. Representative, to your bill.
Once again, thank you so much, Chair Howard and Chair Igo, for this opportunity. I rise to present House File 2144, which appropriates much-needed funding to the Family Homelessness Prevention and Assistance Program, also short for FHPAP. This is just not a bill. It is a life savings, cost-effective, community-driven investment in the well-being of our most vulnerable neighbors. I represent District 38A, where hardworking families are doing everything right, yet still find themselves one unexpected crisis away from losing their home. Whether it is loss of a job, unexpected medical bill, or rent rising faster than the wages, housing instability is not a distant issue. It is a daily reality for many Minnesotans. I've heard many stories at the doors, at our schools, in places of worship and community gatherings. People are not just asking for handouts, folks. They are asking for a fair shot at staying housed and keeping their children safe. FHPAP is one of the most effective tools we have. It is an emergency program that achieves three main things. Number one, prevents homelessness before it begins. It reduces the length of time families stay in emergency housing, and then it eliminates repeated episodes of homelessness. So eligible households must be experiencing a housing crisis and have incomes at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. The program can provide emergency rental, mortgage, and utility assistance, and it does so with compassion, flexibility, and local leadership. And yet, despite this impact, FHPAP is chronically unfunded, and we all know that. Even after the recent one-time increases, the program administrators often run out of funds within hours or weeks of receiving them. Families are told to wait for the next quarterly allocation. But if you're a single mom, single parent who just lost their hours of work, or someone fleeing domestic violence, for example, you can't afford to wait. So the housing crisis is growing, and we know that. We know, if you didn't know, 642,000 Minnesotans households are cost-burdened, spending more than they can afford on housing. And also, we know that no county in Minnesota has enough affordable housing for our low-income households. And then lastly, just 4% of the apartments are affordable to households below 30% of area income, and only 7% of those between 30 and 50% of area median income. So as a result, more and more people are being pushed into homelessness, including families with children, seniors over age 72, and eviction filings are still above pre-pandemic levels. And the number one reason is non-payment of rent, often caused by something as small as a car repair and or a short-term reduction in hours. Let's be clear, housing stability is trauma, but there is hope, and we get to choose and act on this. So please know that by investing in this, it costs about $3,500 to keep a family stable housed through FHPAP, but it can cost up to $45,000 to help the same family recover once they lose their home. This appropriation investment in this program today could save our state, our counties, our cities more than $1.4 billion tomorrow. That's not just compassion policy, it is smart budgeting. With that said, members, this is what smart and moral governance looks like: meeting families where they are and acting before the crisis hits, and investing in people, not just line item. So don't take my word for it. I have a couple of testifiers, Chair. They can please come up and speak on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We do have two testifiers, and we will ask, since we have a full agenda, ask testifiers to keep their remarks to 2 minutes. And up next, we have Renee Rock, Policy Fellow with the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Hello, Chair Igo, Chair Howard, and committee members. My name is Renee Rock. I am in my second year as a Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless as a policy fellow with a focus on the Family Homeless Prevention Assistance Program, also known as FHPAP. And I bring with me personal experience in accessing this program as well. This is a program myself and thousands of households across Minnesota turn to once ineligible for emergency assistance funds when seeking to resolve a negative rent balance or assistance with a mortgage payment. A common scenario that continuously plays out in communities across the state for households are attempts to find resolution ahead of court dates through initiating contact with providers and submitting an application and then sitting in wait for a response. In spite of these efforts, I did not speak with a provider until the day of housing court, only to learn there's not enough funding available to assist me, and was offered numbers to other providers who may still have funds available if I was interested in trying. As a housing advocate, I've learned to equate a provider's lack of response mostly to their lack of funding, which is typically spent within days. The requirements placed upon providers to ensure their dollars span the duration of a biennium directly impacts and limits the number of households they can ultimately serve. This is a reality providers are faced with on a daily basis. Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless supports the funding needed to cover the vast needs of households throughout Minnesota. While most households utilize FHPAP for rental assistance and utility payments, this program is also designed to be used for a wide range of support activities that assist households in obtaining and maintaining housing stability, such as housing and employment search, referrals and case management, to necessary items such as vital documents and furniture. I do want to thank you for allowing me to be here to speak before you today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Yvette Evia Martinez, Senior Program Officer with Greater Twin Cities United Way. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is Yvette Isea Martinez, and I'm Senior Officer of Advocacy at Great Twin Cities United Way. I'm here to express our strong support for HF 2144. The Families Homeless Prevention Assistance Program is vital to Minnesota housing system, offering services like coordinated entry, street outreach, prevention, and rapid rehousing. FHPAP provides support and navigation services, such as the ones that Renee just mentioned, to help Minnesotans at risk of homelessness, going beyond rent assistance. At Greater Twin Cities United Way, our 211 helpline partners with 4 counties to screen FHPAP applicants. In 2024 alone, the helpline fielded 115,000 housing-related phone calls statewide. This, along with data that Wilder provided us in their homelessness study, tells us that over 10,000 Minnesotans were homeless in one night in 2023. 40% of the homelessness population and children and youth are under 24. And homelessness among older adults 55 and older have risen 7% since 2018. This is not only a children's or youth or middle-age crisis of Minnesotans, this is also impacting our seniors who may not be losing employment, but they are retiring or unable to find jobs and therefore unable to also afford their rent. Without this vital support, our seniors or elders wouldn't have a place to live. Demand for housing resources far exceeds availability. Increased funding is essential for housing stability, which benefits families across generations. Stable housing leads to better outcomes for children in school and long-term opportunities for their future and success. It also improves our economy. If people have safe and stable housing, they can also find employment. If they have employment, they're contributing to our economy. Greater Twin Cities United Way strongly supports FHPAP funding because stable housing builds stronger communities. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to member discussion. First on the list, we have Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just ask the representative, I appreciate the heart behind what you're asking here. I'm just questioning the fact that I believe we're just under 75 million. We're 75,900,000. With the governor's budget of 160 million, how does that fall into place? My concern is we're going to fall short on many other much-needed projects out there as well. Have you looked at that? Are there any other alternatives that we can look at to maybe help move forward with this project?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative. We definitely took into account the realities that we're in. The need is great. The original ask was 100K, and 100 million, and I was like, that's not possible in this environment. And so we're definitely open to, opportunities to have discussions in regards to how do we provide as much funding as we can to this program because it is needed. And so I am definitely open to, having conversation around how else can we fund this program because of the critical need for it. So.
Wonderful. Look forward to working with you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley. FHPAP is a really great program. It's really strong. It has really supported a number of families, particularly, I was first really familiar with it through the pandemic crisis, but since then also just understanding that every time we put money into it, it is oversubscribed like almost immediately. So yes, understanding our budget situation I think is really important, but also knowing that where we put our money that has the most impact, I think is also part of that conversation. So I look forward to working with the chair, both chairs, about how we can balance that effort to make sure we're providing a safe, stable home for as many people as we can.
Co-Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair Howard, and thank you, Representative, for the bill in front of us today. This is an issue that again, kind of unites both sides of the aisle about taking care of people when they're in vulnerable times. But I'll echo what Representative Dotz said. You know, unfortunately, we are faced with a massive budget deficit in the state. And that's why I'm happy we're laying the bill over today, and we're going to have conversations as a committee, as co-chairs, and figure out what we can do for this issue to make sure that we balance the needs of everything that we need to address with our small budget that is the housing budget for the state. So I look forward to those conversations and trying to find a path forward where we can do what we can for this bill.
I'll just make a few comments before going to you for the final word. Thank you for bringing the bill forward, Representative Momanyi-Hiltsley. FHPAP is just our critical statewide emergency rental assistance program, and would note that over the last year, we funded a study. Minnesota Housing puts out a study to assess what is the total need out there. If we had the resources to provide this assistance to everyone who asked for it, the need's actually at about $350 million a year. That's how many folks are cost burdened and find themselves in this situation. So I appreciate you bringing a bill forward that has significant resources, but in an area where there's huge significant needs. You know, the housing budget is a small slice of our budget. It should be a larger slice. We all have worked collectively to push to make that happen. And this issue, this bill is a great reason why. So I'll go to you, our representative, for the final word on your bill before we lay it over.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair Howard and Chair Igo, for, again, and the members of this committee for allowing me to bring this forward. And I definitely hear and understand the magnitude of the realities that we are in. And I also appreciate that all of us understand how critical this bill is and how critical the services are. So this bill, again, is more than just numbers. It is about keeping our families safe, stable, and together. And so I respectfully ask you to support this bill, House File 2144, and for the families in every one of our districts who are holding up, who are holding by the thread. Let's invest in hope, in dignity, and in belief that everyone deserves a place to call home. And so, Chair, I renew my motion to have House File 2144 be laid over for consideration, and I hope that you consider putting it on top of the pile. Thank you.
It's a great recommendation, Representative. And with that, I lay over House File 2144 as amended for possible inclusion. Up next, I'm going to pass the gavel over to Representative Kozlowski.
All right, Chair Howard, step right up. Welcome to your Housing Committee. The second bill on the agenda for today is House File 1141, and understand the plan is to lay this bill over. So Chair Howard, would you like to move your bill in front of the committee?
Yes, Chair Kozlowski, I would move the bill.
So moved. Chair Howard, to your bill.
Chair Kozlowski, members of the committee, this bill, House File 1141, would provide $400 million in housing infrastructure bonds, our state's bread and butter tool to address housing needs from border to border, homes to own, homes to rent, homes all across the state. This tool has been an innovative way that Minnesota has set the standard to build housing that, but for this public investment, would not be built. It's why that we see such an oversubscription of the resources with communities all across the state seeking those resources. Over the last 2 years, we provided more than $200 million in housing infrastructure bonds, a historic investment. Still at that level, Minnesota Housing was saying no to 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 projects. The needs are that great. And this is, again, a tool that will help build single-family homes, it'll build workforce housing in greater Minnesota, manufactured housing, multifamily housing, and by investing in this tool now, we can help address our massive housing shortage that we've talked about all session long. And the last thing I'll add is, now is not the time to go backwards. We made considerable, significant investments to build more homes over the last 2 years, and the needs haven't went away. The challenges remain. Now is the time to recognize our housing shortage is in need of public investment, along with policy reform, and take action on a bill like this. And with that, I'll turn it over to my testifiers.
Great, thank you, Chair Howard. And for our testifiers, just a reminder that we'll have 2 minutes for the testimony. And first up is Chad Adams, so if you could just say your name and introduce yourself for the record. And go
Yes,
ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Kozlowski, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Chad Adams, and I'm the CEO of the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, a nonprofit community development corporation serving 30 counties across southwest and south central Minnesota. Our organization produces homes and provides housing services with a mission to partner with communities to develop places for people to call home. Our partnership is a strong supporter of housing infrastructure bonds as we use the funding to leverage several other sources of dollars, such as private bank financing, city, county, or other federal grants and loans. One example of our use of housing infrastructure bonds is the preservation and rehabilitation of 3 apartment buildings in the past 6 years in Wilmer, Alexandria, and one that will be closing this year in Hutchinson, Minnesota, which represent a total of 104 homes in these communities. Our organization has also used housing infrastructure bonds on the new construction of 3 single-family homes to families below 60% of the area median income. The new homes will be placed into our partnership community land trust in Mankato, Minnesota, and will require the homes to be protected and sold to any future affordable home buyer and family for the next 99 years. We again use the housing infrastructure bonds here to leverage funding from the city, federal government, and private donations for these CLT homes, and plan to build 25 more homes in Mankato and St. Peter in the next 3 years. Without the housing infrastructure bonds, these homes would not have been preserved or built, and we would not have leveraged or received the investment of other funding sources from the private and public sector that help support and grow our local economies in greater Minnesota. We're grateful for this committee's work to increase our housing inventory by authorizing new resources for development and preservation. Housing infrastructure bonds have been a critical resource that is essential to make new homes a reality in our state. The present investment, however, has not kept up with demand, and Minnesota is experiencing an extraordinary housing shortage, especially affordable housing available to households making 50% of area median income. I'd like to thank Representative Howard for carrying this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have today or in the future.
Thank you so much for your testimony, for being here. All right, next up, we have Kelly Law. So if you could share your name and title for the record and proceed whenever you're ready.
Vice Chair Kozlowski, Co-Chair Igo, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Kelly Law, and I'm a Senior Policy and Field Building Advisor with the Minnesota Consortium of Community Developers. We represent nonprofit affordable housing developers and operators providing homeownership and rental opportunities across the state. Our members support the development of housing across the entire spectrum, and they house our local workforces, seniors, families, and people in addiction recovery in need of supportive services. Here today to ask you to support House File 1411 and invest in housing infrastructure bonds. As you all know and have heard many times in this committee, Minnesota is experiencing a severe housing shortage to the tune of about more than 100,000 units short of demand, and that's contributing to increasing costs for both renters and homeowners. While there isn't one single solution to solve our state's housing crisis, there is a relatively simple way to solve our state's housing shortage, and that's to preserve what we have and build more housing. Last winter, one of our members, Project for Pride in Living, finished construction on 40 units of housing for individuals living with substance use disorders. This project would not have been built without HIBs. Right now, housing operators are facing unprecedented challenges that are largely outside of their control. These include unparalleled increases in operating costs and rental arrears, significant challenges with public safety, and dramatic changes to property insurance costs and coverage. If these organizations are not stabilized and we do not invest in HIBs, we risk losing decades of public investment into the affordable housing sector, which means families with low incomes could lose their homes or be forced into homelessness. We are grateful for investments made in HIBs in past sessions, but we know that applications for funding far outweigh the number of funds available each year. By passing House File 1141 and authorizing new HIBs this session, we can address Minnesota's housing shortage, signal to developers that funds are available and waiting, and get more people into stable housing. Thank you to Representative Howard for authoring this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for being here. All right, next we'll move to see if there are any members of the public that are wishing to testify today. All right, seeing none, we will move on to member discussion. First member on the list is Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. 400 million. That's a big number, and just wanted to ask you a couple questions. Chair Howard, do you know how many current millions have been let out since 2008, approximate time frame? Do you happen to know, have that? I do, if you want me to read it.
Go for it.
Thank you. It's 495 million to date, with an outstanding principal balance of 443 million. So you're asking to go on top of that another 400 million. And that's, I would say, aspirational. And certainly it's a serious issue, but it's a very large number that I'm struggling to wrap my arms around. But in your bill, it says in lines 1.3 through 1.15 that you have to be able to report the amount of debt service on each series of bonds. Do you know what that number would be, Representative Howard? Cocktail napkin math is also cool.
Yes.
Chair Howard.
I think I'll go to nonpartisan just to get the exact number.
Threw him a curveball. Oh, yeah.
Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. The question was, what would in lines 1.13 through 1.15 of the bill, it says that the Commissioner of M&B must project the annual amount of debt service on each series of bonds issued under this section. On 400 million, what would that be? And then what is the current debt service on the outstanding tranche of money that has already been let in existing bonds?
I think it's in the range of 30 million or so, but I want to go to staff.
Chair Howard, we'll move to Katrina Highmark from nonpartisan.
Chair and members, Representative Nash, to respond to your question about the debt service for 400 million in housing infrastructure bonds in the first year, which would be fiscal 28, the debt service would be 8 million. The second year would be fiscal 29. The total amount of debt service would be 22.4 million. And starting in fiscal year 30 and for the life of the bonds, the total debt service would be 32 million a year.
Representative Nash, any follow-up?
Thanks, Chair. You know my dedication to housing, Chair Howard, and I'm just struggling to see how we service the debt, let alone where it's going to come from, because we don't know that where we're going to get that money from to service the debt. Maybe you could illuminate us on where that's going to come from.
Chair Howard.
Thank you, Chair Kozlowski, Representative Nash. You know, we have budget choices, right, about where to make investments, in the long term. We use bonding as a way to make payments now that we think will have a long lifetime of benefit. I mean, I think about this, and like all of us that take out a mortgage, you know, if you want to buy a home, it's actually going to save us money if we're making investments now versus if we wait and have our housing shortage multiply upon itself. The other thing I would say about budget choices is, you know, there's a proposal floating around here to use about that same level of debt service to refurbish a sports stadium. You know, and I think that's authored by a Republican or as bipartisan author. So like we face budget choices. I think that if we're going to utilize debt service in this way, we should do so in a way that's going to have a clear benefit in the here and now and long term. Of course, we face budget. We'll have Chair Igo and I will have to work together on a budget, but I believe it's entirely appropriate for us to be bringing forward bills that have solutions that match the scope of the challenge we're up against.
Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. Well, my name is not on any sports stadium refurbishment bill, as you know, and I'm asking the question not in a gotcha question sort of manner, but you're a fiscal chair, I'm a fiscal chair, we have to make difficult decisions, and I just don't know that this is, and you heard me say this last year, when we bring these bills forward and we say we're going to get 400 million or whatever we want to do, we have a lot of people that show up and they begin getting these expectations that you're going to be able to deliver on that. But the budgetary reality is that you're not. And I just think that if we were to base bills more in what is possible than what is aspirational and then manage expectations accordingly, I think we're in a much better spot. Thank you, Chair.
All right, next up we have Representative Dotseth, Vice Chair Dotseth, that is.
Thank you, Chair and Chair. Representative Howard, can you confirm what would be the debt service? Maybe I misunderstood. What was the amount that we would be looking at for that 400 million?
Chair Howard.
Chair Kozlowski, Vice Chair Zatseth, roughly 30 million a biennium.
Okay. With that, how
Representative
much-
Dotseth, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. What is the current interest rate on that currently right now, and what would the interest rate be on the new debt service?
Chair Howard.
I don't have the exact number at the ready, but traditionally, the rates that we get for general obligation bonds and housing infrastructure bonds are quite competitive.
Vice Chair Dotseth.
When you say, thank you, Chair. When you say competitive, what would the approximate interest rate be?
Chair Howard.
Staff?
I don't have that number right handy, but I can get it to you, Representative.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Rep. Dotseth?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll turn it over to Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chair Howard, for the bill in front of us. We've had discussions on HIBs. I think many members of this committee, as well as members of the public here who have came together, have had lots of good conversation on the importance of HIBs. But at this time, a $400 million ask, it is hard listening to the questions that were asked. I mean, we're asking to authorize basically the same amount of HIBs that we've done since 2008 in one biennium at a time where we have a $6 billion deficit. This kind of debt request would be for 7% of our deficit, which is just, it's hard at a time where we need to tighten the belt to justify doing that. And that's why I'm glad that we're working on proposals like the Yes to Homes initiatives that do have a zero fiscal note, that we can move the needle. So I look forward to the discussions ahead on what we can do on HIBs, but I know that 400 million is going to be a number that is just unfortunately too high, because even during a budget surplus 2 years ago, we couldn't do HIBs to the amount of this. And I think when we're in a deficit, we're going to need to tighten the belt and have those hard conversations to come to terms with that. So looking forward to the conversations ahead, but thank you for bringing the bill forward.
All right, Chair Howard, back to you for closing comments on your bill.
Thank you, Chair Kozlowski and Chair Igo, for your comments. And thank you for recognizing the bipartisan nature of housing infrastructure bonds. This legislature has passed housing infrastructure bonds on a bipartisan basis multiple times, and it's a tool that benefits our whole state. And so just look forward to working together to authorize HIBs and utilize that as a tool this session. The more dollars we put into it, the more homes we're going to create, the better chance we're going to have to solve our housing shortage and be in yes and mode in terms of both funding and policy. So appreciate the comments and the dialogue.
All right, and with that, I lay over House File 1141 for possible inclusion. All right, moving to the third bill up on the agenda for today is another Chair Howard special in House File 2480. And representatives, the plan is to also lay this bill over. Chair Howard, would you like to move your bill in front of the committee?
Chair Kozlowski, I would move House File 2480 before the committee.
All right, so moved. Chair Howard, to your bill.
Chair Kozlowski, members of the committee, House File 2480, when you pull it up and you read it, it feels very technical. But it's one that is very important for public housing authorities across our state and very important to the thousands of Minnesotans that live in public housing all across Minnesota. And at its core, this bill is about making sure that we're able to preserve the public housing that we have all across the state for thousands of Minnesotans. Now to the technical piece. Public housing authorities are always in the position of trying to maximize every last dollar, federal, state, local, that they need to address significant community needs. And in order to leverage federal dollars through HUD, there's been the creation of a path a number of years ago that allows public housing authorities to reposition their entities and create a wholly new entity, but it's made up of the same board, the same everything, and this unlocks resources to address community needs. Where our public housing authorities have run into challenge is that MMB has cited potential constitutional issues with terming these repositioned organizations as wholly public entities. And the impact from this is that public housing authorities have been forced to choose. Should we reposition in a way that allows us to unlock federal resources, but lose out on the chance to access state general obligation bonds, or don't reposition lose out on needed federal resources in order to have a chance to get general obligation public dollars. And this bill aims to correct that or create a legislative fix to make sure it's clear in our state statutes that these entities are in fact public entities, which they most certainly are. And, you know, the way I think about this is sort of if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, acts like a duck, it's probably a duck. If these public housing authorities are organized like a public housing authority, then they probably are a public housing authority. And that's what this legislation seeks to make sure it's clear in state law.
All right, thank you, Chair Howard. And next, we will move on to our testifiers, which we just have one. And looks like you're up there. Welcome Melissa Taphorn to the committee, and feel free to say your name and title for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Kozlowski, Chair Igo. My name is Melissa Taphorn. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington County CDA and the Legislative Chair for Minnesota NARA, which stands for National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. I want to thank you and the full legislature for responding to the shortfall in federal funds for public housing capital funds. The only funding housing agencies have to make repairs to their public housing units. The state has allocated over $100 million in general obligation bonds and appropriations to the publicly owned housing program. We affectionately call that, with every acronym, a POP program. Housing authorities continue to look for other means to not only address their capital backlog, but also to keep up with the maintenance of their buildings. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, has even provided us, as Chair Howard has described, paths to do that, and they call it repositioning. These repositioning paths allow housing authorities or public housing authorities, agencies, to bring in other federal funds as well to borrow as needed to address those properties' capital needs. A couple of these paths require the housing authority to create a separate entity while still in the housing authority's control. However, we're not able to do that if we already have a POP loan or intend to apply for one because that new entity is not considered a public entity according to Minnesota Management and Budget. This bill attempts to cure that. It's important to note that it does not expand the number of properties, nor does it circumvent the public purpose and public ownership eligibility for general obligation bonds. We have worked with Minnesota Management and Budget over a number of years to get guidance on all of the other repositioning paths, and this is the last one where we have to create that separate entity. For my housing authority, we've taken out a $271,000 POP loan about 10 years ago against a 40-unit public housing building, which happens to be our only public housing. We would like to reposition those units to a housing choice voucher platform where the amount HUD pays us towards rent would go from $280 a month per unit to $1,020 per unit per month. That alone would give us $350,000 in 1 year to reinvest in our property. So thank you for your time, and thank you to Chair Howard for bringing this forward. Appreciate your help.
Thank you so much for being here and for your testimony. Are there any members of the public that are wishing to testify on this bill? All right, looking around and seeing none, we'll move to member discussion. First on the list is Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. Chair Howard, lines 2.22 through 2.25, you say an authority may create a public corporation in accordance with section for the purpose of purchasing, owning, and operating real property converted through the Federal Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. Is there, because I didn't see it in your bill, is there a limit on the number of properties that any corporation that you're proposing be created could own?
Chair Howard.
Chair Kozlowski, Representative Nash, that really hasn't been part of the discussion also. I don't think that that is a piece of this bill. It's more just making sure that we're able to term that these public repositioned entities as public housing authorities. So it doesn't, this bill doesn't really concern itself with quantity or number.
Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. Well, in the past, in this very committee, we've heard bills that would limit the number of properties that any corporation could acquire.
Oh, that's right.
You knew where I was going. You knew where I was going. Representative Agbaje was already there. So if that scenario were to be an eventuality, and all respect to my friend, I hope it never happens, But if that were to happen, what does this do to your corporations that you've just stood up with no details in the rest of the bill?
Chair Howard.
Chair Kozlowski, Representative Nash, it sounds like you want to hear a Representative Agbaje bill and have a rich discussion about that, but I don't quite, it's
Do
tough
you?
to really consider that sort of hypothetical about another hypothetical bill.
Representative Nash.
Thanks, Chair. I always enjoy an invitation to debate, as you know, but I'm just pointing out that a dominant topic of conversation in committee from your side of the aisle has been to limit corporations because they are bad in buying multiple properties. And I would have just thought that you would have addressed that somehow in your bill. So thank you.
All right, next on the list is Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair Howard, and thank you, Representative Nash. So, not that this is actually part of your bill. Your bill is more about ensuring that the corporations that are made, that are already housing authorities, that work under HUD, and that use what HUD has said, which is actually a larger conversation that we could have offline, but HUD is actually encouraging our public housing authorities to move into this private sector space. So there's a large conversation around that, but your bill is at least saying, to the extent that that's what HUD is encouraging people to do, our state government should at least allow those corporations to be able to take advantage of what a traditional public housing authority should do. Is that correct?
Chair Howard.
Chair Kozlowski, Representative Agbaje, that is correct. We really, where these entities have engaged in this repositioning, we want them to be successful. We want them to access resources to continue to preserve housing. We know the needs are so great, and so that's why we're here with this proposal.
Representative Agbaje, any follow-up?
Yes, Chair Kozlowski. So that's this bill, but Representative Nash, we can talk offline about how my bill, which I hope is coming, would probably not affect these public housing. But thank you, Chair, for the indulgence.
All right, next over to Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair Howard, for bringing the bill in front of us. But I really want to thank NARO for all the work they've done in getting us to this point. Lots of education through committee members and our communities about the importance of this legislation that's in front of us, so we can preserve affordable housing units. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's why this bill is in front of us. So I appreciate the collaboration and work on this, and it's taken years to get us to this point. And I appreciate that. I was educated by my local HRA folks on this one, on how important this is. So happy to be a co-sponsor on the bill and working to get this done. So again, we can preserve these housing units because the math doesn't lie and the statistics don't lie. If we lose these units, we can't replace them. And the state that we are in Minnesota, being 100,000 units down, we can't afford to lose affordable housing units. So this is going to give our HRAs another tool to preserve those units so we can keep moving the state forward and end this housing crisis. Thank you.
All right, Chair Howard, we'll go back to you for any closing comments.
Chair Kozlowski, members, and thank you, Trigo, for your support of this bill. I think I'll just close by saying this has been around for a number of years. There's been multiple conversations with MMB, and they've raised their concerns. And I'm fairly confident those conversations have been exhausted in terms of whether we could get to something that doesn't involve a legislative answer. And this is the best answer moving forward. It passed as part of the House Omnibus Bill last year, but didn't quite make it to that very step across the finish line, and this is the year to make sure we get it all the way across. Thank you.
Right, and with that, I lay over House File 2480 for possible inclusion. Thank you, Chair Howard. And the last bill of the day, before I hand the gavel back to Chair Howard, will be Representative Agbaje's House File 2148.
Would you like to move your bill, Representative Agbaje?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to move House File 2148 to be laid over for possible inclusion.
Representative Agbaje, to your bill.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm here presenting today House File 2148. So as we've been hearing about in this committee, we are looking for varied solutions to our housing crisis. This bill presents an exciting opportunity to make an investment from the general fund that will pay long-term dividends for decades to come. One of the things that we continue to hear from housing developers is that they can't build affordable housing because it doesn't meet their bottom line. And from affordable housing developers, we hear that operating costs are overwhelming and making it hard to maintain their properties. We know our federally funded programs also have limitations. They're not always reliable, and they do sometimes hamper the ability of housing providers to adequately cover operating costs. So we need investments in sustainable and long-term solutions. And one area that we're beginning to explore is the role of our local jurisdictions, like cities and counties, in creating, owning, and maintaining housing for their communities. Known as locally owned housing, some counties in Minnesota are developing a more sustainable response to the lack of consistently and permanently affordable housing in their communities. These programs are marked by a couple of characteristics that set them apart from other publicly funded programs. One is that they are permanently affordable because that housing stays in the public trust for decades or longer. They're also self-sustaining because they usually use a set of revolving funds, and so that flexibility in that program allows counties to rent to a mix of income ranges for the purpose of meeting needs of various communities and to create a self-sustaining program that can keep up with ongoing operating costs. The higher rents and the market rate rents help subsidize and pay for the entirely locally owned program. This type of housing is a growing trend in Minnesota and in different parts of the country. For some counties, building locally owned housing complements the work of other developers by filling in the holes in the market where those groups can't or won't build. But that model, in order to realize its full potential and become self-sustaining, does need state investment. So overall, the bill before us today will create a revolving loan fund at MHFA, which is accessible to local municipalities like counties and cities. Those loans can then be used to develop and rehabilitate housing. And then the housing should also be owned by that municipality at a 75% ownership stake as in this current draft, and owned for at least 50 years. And then the bill also puts in requirements for the types of affordability levels in the bill, trying to ensure that counties are using the fund to create sustainable housing that is also mixed income. So in Minnesota, Olmsted and Washington counties have been leaders in building housing projects through a locally owned model along with other localities. And you'll hear from some of them as well as other testifiers that will better describe how this model has worked for them and the need to expand it. And with that, I'll turn it to my testifiers.
And Representative Agbaje, I think you do have an A1.
Oh, yes, I do have an A1 amendment. It includes the amount of money that we want to start with the seed fund, so to speak. And it specifies that the amount, that the appropriation, instead of a blank appropriation, turns it to $10 million.
Representative Agbaje moves the A1. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The A1 is adopted. Now we move to testifiers. And first we have Farhan Bedell, a renter in Dakota County. Welcome to the committee.
Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Farhan Bedell. I'm a father of three. I live in Apple Valley. I'm a renter and the sole provider of my family. I grew up across the river here in Minneapolis. This is the city that I loved. As a youth, as a youngster, I volunteered at a park. But as I became an adult, I figured out that it was very difficult for me to rent in the city. That became more evident when I married in 2018. I quickly realized how difficult this was renting in the city. I had my first newborn and was looking for a two-bedroom apartment and working two jobs. I still could not afford a two-bedroom unit here in the city of Minneapolis. So those challenges were very difficult for me. I was very fortunate enough to have a friend who lived in Burnsville. And one day I was chatting with him. He told me about a program in Dakota County that's locally owned and affordable. And he said, you know what, Farhan, maybe you should apply. And thanks to my good friend here, I applied for this program. And the blessing of my second newborn also came with the blessing of an affordable two-bedroom apartment that I can afford. This was tremendously helpful for my family. I didn't want to leave the city of Minneapolis because that was home for me, but it was unfortunate I could not afford. So I had to do what was best for my family. And thankfully for this program that's locally owned, controlled housing, and affordable, it made the difference for us. Now I'm in my third year in this program. beautiful community, very well connected. And I have to say, my message here to this governing body is that, if you support working families, if you support family members who are living paycheck to paycheck, this is the bill you should support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have David Dunn with Olmsted County, Olmsted HRA. I see Mr. Dunn. If I don't see Mr. Dunn, then we'll go back to Melissa Taphorn. And there she is.
Good afternoon again, Chair Howard, Chair Igo, and committee members. I'm Melissa Taphorn, the Executive Director of the Washington County Community Development Agency, and I just want to say that I used to work at Dakota County CDA and probably built his home. So I'm here today in support of House File 2148, a bill that would significantly help in the creation of new permanently affordable housing choices for our communities. For many years, the Washington County Community Development Agency has invested in locally owned housing options for our county. The CDA owns and operates 990 locally controlled housing units in 10 different cities, in addition to the 160 federally subsidized housing units that we own. These rental communities are owned by the CDA and funded with a mix of funding sources, including local levy and county bonding dollars. They are not federal public housing units, but they belong to the public. We are looking for ways that we can add to the supply of our locally owned portfolio. And this is where the locally owned and controlled housing comes in. Currently, we can step in where the private market is unable or unwilling to finance a project. This could happen at a brownfield or a development or a city that just doesn't have a really robust demand where we can build something smaller than a private developer would be interested in. We don't compete with the private and affordable housing developers, but we complement them. The problem is that we lack access to consistent funding mechanisms to scale this program into a self-sustaining model. So this bill helps to create that funding mechanism and provides much needed immediate capital for counties ready, willing, and able to build more affordable housing, but for the lack of funds. 2, expands a model of the affordable housing that sustains itself by using market rate rents to subsidize the lower rents and the operating expenses, and keeps subsidized housing permanently affordable. With this modest state investment, we could unlock a powerful tool in supply and affordability. The locally owned housing program is specifically designed to be self-sustaining in terms of operating costs, using a mix of deeply affordable, and market rate rents. Thank you to Representative Agbaje for bringing this forward and to the committee for considering this bill. Thank you.
Next, we have Lucas Franco with LaUna. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Co-Chair Howard, Co-Chair Igo, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Lucas Franco. I'm here on behalf of LaUna, Minnesota, and North Dakota. We represent more than 14,000 skilled construction workers who build and maintain Minnesota's infrastructure. I'm here today to express support for House File 2148, which would establish a locally controlled housing fund. This legislation will spark innovation in housing production and represents a positive step towards solving our state's deepening housing crisis. As you all know very well, Minnesota faces a substantial shortage of affordable housing. We've made progress addressing our housing needs, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. HF 2148 adds another tool in our housing infrastructure toolkit. Publicly owned and locally controlled housing has a number of advantages over the tax credit subsidy model we primarily rely on. First, unlike traditional tax credit housing, publicly owned housing ensures that affordability never expires. That means no 30-year affordability limits, no speculative buyouts, just stable, accessible housing for working families like our members. Second, the revolving loan fund creates a self-sustaining public investment model where funds are repaid and reinvested into new projects. Third, it empowers local communities to build the housing that they need. Our members build Minnesota, but many cannot afford to live in the communities they serve. This bill ensures that cities and counties can directly finance housing for middle and lower income workers, keeping communities stable and ensuring that our workforce has secure, high-quality housing. Fourth and finally, this is an efficient use of scarce public dollars. Publicly led housing maximizes the use of public land, tax-exempt bonds, and public financing to create high-quality, mixed-income housing that can self-sustain without constant subsidies. This is a smart investment in innovation, like House File 1141, the Hibbs legislation, which we also strongly support. It leverages public investments to efficiently produce the housing that we so urgently need. I urge you to support and pass House File 2148. Thank you for your time and consideration of this legislation.
Thank you. That's the last person that signed up to testify. Is anyone from the public interested in testifying? If not, we can go to member discussion. I don't see folks signed up. Go to Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Representative Agbaje, for the bill. You know, this is a comprehensive idea. And again, it's not a new idea. It's kind of a proven idea in red and blue states around the country that we've seen work. I guess my one question for the bill author would be, as we're trying to get back to more local control with a housing trust fund like this, is there appetite for us to maybe peel back some of the mandates and regulations to allow for more freedom in this market to be able to do exactly what the last testifier just said, allow those communities to choose and make those decisions a little better to adapt?
Representative Agbaje.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Igo. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point of this is like the local entity is coming back in. The local entity is stepping up and providing that type of housing that the community members are saying that they need. So whether that's single-family homes or multifamily or townhomes or whatever that looks like for people, multi-generational housing, we want the community members who have a say in their government to be able to dictate then what type of housing it looks like.
Chair Igo.
Yep. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Agbaje, for that. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving me the bill language a few weeks back. I did have the time to review it. Sorry we haven't had that conversation yet. But it is a very interesting idea, and I look forward to working on it. I just wish we didn't have the fiscal impact that it does, because everything's hard right now. But we can have those conversations moving forward together and see what we can do. So thank you.
And Representative Kozlowski.
All right, sorry I got on the list a little late. Thank you, Chair Howard and Representative, for bringing this bill forward. Personally, I'm really jazzed about this bill, and just the concept of social housing is something that many folks in my district and across the state, I've gone to a few different conferences where it's specifically talking about housing, and essentially what we're trying to do is guarantee everybody a safe, secure, affordable place to call home, and in a system where we're not only making sure that everybody has a place to lay their head at night and dream, we also are in this narrative kind of like worldview shift of how we think about housing as like not just as a basic necessity, not as a luxury. And I think this is a really important component into that of how we decommodify our housing. I think we talked in this committee, this biennium and last biennium about 95% of our housing is privatized. And so this is really about putting the power back into the hands of the people at that local level, which people want a say in how it's designed, where their communities, where they get to live and grow and invest in our communities. And so I just want to say thank you and look forward to continuing the conversations, obviously, as putting another request in on the pile. But this is really important, whether it's the housing infrastructure bonds, the FHPAP, and preventing homelessness, to really changing the trajectory of how we do housing in Minnesota and in this country. And I think getting something on the board and being able to start there and scale it up is exactly where we should be headed. So thank you.
I'll make a few comments before going to the bill author for final comments. I too am very jazzed by this bill. I really think we need in the housing space to be considering new and innovative ideas. And a few of the aspects of this that I just love, one is the self-sustaining aspect of it, that we're able to leverage resources that revolve and help us create more housing without kind of going back and back and back for more public investment. And two, this just really reimagines public housing in a way that I think is responsive to what communities want to see and what Minnesotans want to see built. And so it's an exciting proposal on many counts, and I'm grateful for you for carrying it. And I'll go to you for the final word, Representative Agbaje.
Sure. Thank you so much, chairs, and thank you, committee members. I really appreciate the conversation. I hope we can have many more. Again, this is just a step in a direction to allow our local entities to have a better say in what our housing looks like. I think the other really strong part about this bill, too, is it's really showcasing how people from different walks of life can live together, because a key part of this is that people from varied incomes will live near each other. And I think that's really important to building our social cohesion throughout. And so as conversations go, I understand that, we are in a very tough budget situation. But as I said earlier, I think it behooves us to look at where do we get the most impact for our investment, and that's where we should be thinking about where we put our funding. So thank you, Chair Howard, and thank you, committee members.
With that, House File 2148 as amended is laid over for possible inclusion. And our last bill on the agenda is House File 999. Representative Agbaje, the plan is to lay this over. Would you like to move your bill in front of the committee?
Yes, Chair Howard, that is my motion.
Representative Agbaje, to your bill.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, again. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. So presenting House File 999 today. This bill seeks to continue with the results that we've seen in our first-generation down payment assistance program that we implemented back in 2023. This bill is meant to create a permanent first-generation down payment assistance fund that runs through our community partner, Midwest Minnesota Community Development Corporation, or MMCDC. The program has been successful since it started helping families in 2024, and in its first 7 months, it helped 600 families become homeowners. 90% of those are owners from underrepresented communities across Minnesota, which is helping us close the disparities in home ownership. Home ownership has shown strong correlation with improvements in health, education, and other positive economic outcomes. This bill gives us an opportunity to make good on the state's investment in the people of Minnesota for the long term. We are giving people a hand up to get into home ownership that allows them to better take care of their families and communities. This bill updates the definition of a household to become a home buyer to clarify that it is the person who is seeking the down payment funds. The bill also asks for $25 million in the first biennium and then an ongoing $50 million to ensure that there will be funds to support first-generation home buyers with down payment assistance, which is often the major barrier to owning a home. The bill also updates the down payment assistance amount that an applicant is eligible for, moving it from $32,000 as a max to 10% of the home price, which helps to reflect the current situation of opening up more homes to more people, especially as home prices are still quite high. The bill also clarifies that the loan is forgiven after 5 years as intended. And finally, any remaining funds is remitted back to the agency to support the Workforce and Homeownership Development Fund. I think I have a lot of testifiers on this, so I'll turn it over to them, and they can talk about how the program thus far has impacted their lives and really helped them, and what they hope to see in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Agbaje. Our first testifier is Karen Larson with Midwest Minnesota Community Development Corporation. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the First Generation Homebuyer Community Down Payment Assistance Program. I am Karen Larson, Vice President of Mortgage Lending at Midwest Minnesota Community Development Corporation, or MMCDC. The First Generation Community DPA program was designed with input from a broad cross-sector group, including realtors, mortgage lenders, homebuyer education providers, nonprofit community lenders, and more. MMCDC brought experience and scale to the program, having decades of experience in lending and housing development, with 27 years of mortgage lending and down payment assistance. Due to our affiliates and lending totaling hundreds of millions of dollars, we have done so within regulatory guidelines and have robust policies, procedures to ensure compliance with state and federal requirements. After the First Gen DPA program was enacted in May 2023, MMCDC reviewed program guidelines with Minnesota Housing to ensure compliance with the legislation and state requirements. Via an RFP, we selected 10 partner DPA lenders across the state, reviewing experience, certifications, licensing, and capacity. MMCDC reviews all applications and assigns complete ones on a first-come, first-served basis to partner DPA lenders. We conduct file audits on 10% of closed loans for program compliance and review all closed loan files for completeness. We also send to Minnesota Housing 10% of closed loans for audit, monthly reports on closed loans, reservations, commitments, and request monthly funding based on closed loans, commitments, and reservations. This model has worked well to provide first-gen DPA loans to borrowers across Minnesota allowing them to choose the best mortgage product for their needs. With homebuyer education required prior to the purchase agreement, this model sets up the homebuyers for long-term success with knowledge of the buying process and confidence on what they can afford. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Drew Gabizi with Habitat for Humanity. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today in support of first-generation down payment assistance. My name is Drew Gabizi, and I'm the Advocacy Director at Habitat for Humanity of Minnesota, the statewide support organization for the 24 habitats across the state. Homeownership remains one of the most effective pathways to stability, yet many struggle to overcome the significant barrier of a down payment. We see this in rural Minnesota, where limited housing supply and rising costs create additional obstacles. House File 999 offers a critical solution. A key strength of this program is its flexibility to be used in conjunction with USDA Section 502 direct loans, a vital financing tool for low and moderate income home buyers in rural areas. These loans provide an affordable path to homeownership, and by pairing first-gen DPA with a USDA direct loan, Habitat affiliates support access to homeownership opportunities for families across the state. For example, in communities in northern Minnesota served by Itasca County Habitat, recently a home buyer who would otherwise be locked out of the housing market was able to purchase a home. The demand for homeownership opportunities in these regions is growing, and these continued investments would ensure that more first-generation buyers have a chance to establish roots and contribute to the economic vitality of their communities. I urge you to support House File 999. Thank you, Representative Agbaje, for championing this and for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Jason Peterson with NeighborWorks Home Partners. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Peterson. I'm the Executive Director with NeighborWorks Home Partners. We're a Minnesota-based nonprofit and NeighborWorks America Home Ownership Center. We work with approximately 1,500 families a year to buy, fix, and keep what is likely one of the biggest investments in their lives, their home. In the last year alone, our work culminated in over $133 million of direct investment in Minnesota communities. NeighborWorks Home Partners was one of the first groups to pilot a first-generation down payment program back in 2017. We found this program to be a crucial way to support lower-income families that do not have access to generational wealth, overcome what is the largest barrier to home ownership, those upfront costs. At NeighborWorks Home Partners, we provide both the lending resources, such as the down payment, as well as the wraparound support to ensure and empower families with the knowledge to be successful. Our organization provides a number of down payment assistance programs, and we've been fortunate to be an administrator of the Community First Gen program. While this program has had great success, while down payment programs have had great success, the impact has been limited because of the limited investment. The scope and the scale of this program has been a game changer for Minnesota families seeking to become homeowners all across Minnesota that do not have access to generational wealth. I just want to highlight a few key components of this program that make this unique. One is fund reservation. So in this program, it's similar to a mortgage pre-approval, which is issued to a potential home buyer. This removes the uncertainty and allows the home buyer, the low-income home buyer, to be competitive with offers, which is key in this housing market. A second key component is consumer choice. This program allows borrowers to utilize any lender they would like to with any program. Consumer choice across the state is very important. And finally, I would just like to again highlight homebuyer education. Homebuyer education is required prior to anybody accessing this program. So this ensures that folks have that knowledge ahead of time so they're making a well-informed decision. Thank you very much for considering continuing support of this important program.
Thank you. Next up, we have Makita Davis with Three Rivers Community Action. Welcome to the committee.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Makita Davis. I'm a homeownership advisor at Three Rivers Community Action. and I'm here today to speak in support of the First Generation Community Down Payment Assistance Fund. As someone who's worked directly with underserved families in Greater Minnesota, I've seen firsthand the transformative impact of this program. So for many in my community, homeownership has felt out of reach for generations. Systemic barriers from redlining to inequitable access to credit have left families without the generational wealth needed to secure a home. This program is changing that. I've personally worked with families who, for the first time in their family's histories, are able to be competitive in purchasing a home, and not just any home, a safe and stable one that allows them to thrive and build long-term financial security. However, trust takes time. Programs like these need they need to be more than just pilots. They need longevity. Families need to understand and access these resources, and the community needs to see the success stories multiply. When that happens, more families will take the leap into homeownership, creating generational wealth and strengthening our community. One example is Rika's journey to homeownership. Rika became the first one in her family to graduate college to become a registered nurse. But as the most successful person in her family, she's often asked to provide financial assistance to others in her family network. So this made it very hard for her to save for her own future. So when she visited our office, I knew exactly what she needed to make her dreams come true. The first generation community, it's a mouthful, down payment assistance fund. She was able to become the first again in her family. She was able to graduate college, become the first person to buy a home. And now this home is not just for her immediate family, it's for her entire family, where they're able to thrive together and share memories and, just be a family, and something that she's worked really hard to achieve. And so this is just another example of how well this program works. It's making homeownership possible for families who have been historically excluded. And I just urge you to extend and expand this program so that it can continue breaking down barriers and creating lasting change. Thank you, Representative Agbaje, and members of the committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Pat Paulson with Lakes Area Realty. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Howard, Chair Igo, committee members. I'm Pat Paulson, speaking in support of program funding for first-generation down payment assistance. I'm in my 40th year as a realtor and an active volunteer serving on the boards of the Minnesota Realtors, the National Association of Realtors, and a past president of the Minneapolis area Realtors. I've also spent 30 years volunteering for nonprofits such as NeighborWorks, PRG, Model Cities, teaching homebuyer workshops. I've represented hundreds of first-time buyers from these workshops using down payment assistance programs. They are some of the most prepared and successful long-term homeowners. The pilot project rolled out less than a year ago with strong results. While it addresses buyers' primary obstacle of inadequate savings, it has been especially timely and helpful in this higher interest rate, low affordability environment by allowing mortgage principal reduction as well. Owning a home is one of the best investments an individual or family can make. It locks you into long-term housing stability and affordability and creates a path to building intergenerational wealth. Increasing home ownership is also an excellent investment for our communities and for our state of Minnesota. This program brings buyers into the market that either could not or would not buy without the assistance, thereby increasing sales. Research by the National Association of Realtors shows that a typical home sale in Minnesota generates about $123,000 in economic activity and creates one new job. In addition, since most home sellers also will buy, many sales lead to another or multiple sales with additional economic activity. In summary, this program expands homeownership opportunities while increasing sales and economic activity, growing our tax revenue without rate increases to the benefit of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Keenan Raverty with Bell Bank Mortgage and Minnesota Mortgage Association. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Howard, and members of the committee. My name is Keenan Rafferty. I'm here in support of the bill. I chair the Government Affairs Committee for the Minnesota Mortgage Association and also representing the Minnesota Bankers Association, where I serve as a volunteer. But my day job is with a company called Bell Bank Mortgage. We're the largest retail mortgage lender in the state of Minnesota. Bell Bank is also the largest family and employee-owned bank in the upper Midwest. And we have locations across the state of Minnesota, including throughout greater Minnesota. Homeownership affordability, as you continue to hear, is a problem statewide. One of the largest challenges that we face is access to down payment resources. This continuation of this program certainly helps with that. Challenges continue to be higher interest rates, lack of inventory, higher home prices. All of these put burdens on families, but especially families who are first-generation home buyers where they don't have access to that generational wealth. This is a continuation of funding, so we've got a track record to build off of, but we've seen expanded access to home ownership, better home buyer education, homeowner stability, and of course, wealth building. I just will close by saying that this has broad industry support, not only from the Bankers Association and the Mortgage Association, my employer, Bell Bank, and Bell Bank Mortgage, but it's currently being utilized by over 100 different banks and lenders across the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the last person we have signed up to testify. Is there anyone from the public that would wish to testify? If not, we can go to member discussion. And first on the list, Vice Chair Dotseth.
Thank you, Chair Howard. Representative Agbaje, out of the 600 participants that took advantage of the loan program, how much money was actually utilized for that? How many million was utilized for that program?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair Howard. I'd probably have to ask MMC to come back up if they have any of that funding information, but I believe that many of the families probably took, at the time it was a maximum of up to, well, it's still a maximum of $32,000 per household purchase, and so they probably took somewhere up around that range.
Ms. Larson, did you have additional information?
I do have those numbers from the first 7 months that she had mentioned. 18 million was used, including February. We've closed 700 loans to first-generation home buyers for 21 million.
21 million.
Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Chair Howard. With that, do you have a map that shows the counties and locations where most of those loans were allocated?
I actually
Ms. Larson.
Just that my office generates. I've got it with me here if you want to pass around. This is the one that we did at the end of February. This is just who the DPA lenders were.
All right, we'll have one of the pages kind of pass it around, and then we'll try to see if we can send it out to the committee.
Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Chair Howard. Just one final question would be, with that, how many new homes were actually created with this program, as far as new home constructions, townhomes, et cetera? Do we have any record of that
I do not have a
information?
breakdown of that.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll hand this around and again, get this emailed out to committee members as well. Next, we have Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this forward. I probably have a few questions just to understand this a little bit, why not, I know the goal is to get people into homes, and one of the obstacles of getting, many people will have the payment for the home available, but the down payment is the issue. So why not do this program differently instead of a forgivable loan? Why not use it as something that's self-sustained so you don't need to come back to the state to keep getting money? So in other words, if you get a loan, you get a down payment, and then when you move out, you pay that money back to the state because your home would have appreciated in value for your next home, and then that money can be used to provide more people and more opportunity instead of relying on the state to be in a good financial situation to have that money, that millions of dollars the next time.
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Johnson. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question and an interesting idea. I think, folks have lots of different ways of approaching down payment assistance. I think one of the things that we're also trying to do with down payment assistance is ensure that people are able to build that equity in their property and be able to pass it down to further generations. So I think that's probably one of the reasons we were looking at we did make it a forgivable loan, and then so that way folks, as long as they stayed in that home, then that would be theirs. And from my perspective, I see, the role of public dollars in this is really just kind of spearheading in an area that our government has actually caused a lot of harm when it comes to ensuring that people have access to home ownership. And so this is a way that we can start to repair that for everyone across the state of Minnesota.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I think that went a different direction than I thought it was going to go, that you're saying this is used so that the government can, I guess, pay for past wrongs. I guess I'm misunderstanding. So now this is more seen as a grant to, I don't know, how do I word this? Because it sounds like this money is being used for purposes other than getting people in homes.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Agbaje.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative Johnson, no. The purpose is to get people into homes. That is what this program does. It is a forgivable loan, so they do have to meet requirements. They have to go to home ownership education trainings. They have to live in the home for a certain number of years. They have to make sure they're making those payments on time for the 5 years. So they are doing everything as a homeowner. The second part of my comment, what it is going to, is the purpose of why we instituted this program in the first place. We know that there are a number of people who don't have access to home ownership, and it's for a variety of reasons. It could be personal reasons, it could also be societal reasons, it could be institutional reasons as to why. As you heard from some of the testifiers, that is true that our government, both federal and state, did prevent certain types of people from owning homes. And so part of our wanting to make sure that we have down payment assistance for people who are first generation is to make sure that they have that same access to the American dream as everyone else. And so should they want it, if they're eligible for this program, if they meet the criteria, they have the ability to use that financing to purchase the home and build their home equity and pass down generational wealth.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative. I was just looking at it a different way. It's this thinking is, how do you help more people by constantly having money in the fund to help the next person, the next person, next person, with the thought that homes appreciate in value as they go, and you pay down as you go for loans and stuff like that. So that was just trying to figure out another way that we can help even more people have that opportunity to get into a home, because we know down payments are basically an obstacle that prevents most people from getting into their homes. So thank you, Representative.
Representative Hussain.
Thank you, committee members, and I want to thanks to Representative Agbaje for bringing this forward. I was here for the last 2 years, and this bill has changed significantly. A lot of people that I know that have never dreamed about housing and having an opportunity to own a house. This bill will address the disparities that if we want to make sure that we talk about American dream, but a lot of people do not have that dream. The people that just look like me, especially, it gives them opportunity to own a home. Individuals like that, family access, it was able to give access, safe and stable, affordable housing, and creating a strong foundation for opportunity to succeed. And if we want to address that gap and making sure that, everybody have a place for them to sleep and to wake up, we need to support this kind of great programs because I have seen it, I swear to God. Hundreds and hundreds of people that have participated and have a home for them to live right now. We might have differences, but this is addressing that we need to. There's a data that I want to share with you. 29% to 24% Black Minnesotan household own their home. We're comparing to 77% to 78% white Minnesotan owns home. This is significant disparities, a high and ongoing challenge in achieving equitable ownership opportunity cross-racial line in the state of Minnesota. This is one thing that we need to address. This gives, for those people that dream about it, that could never had an opportunity to put a down payment, it gives accessibility and housing. If we want to address the homelessness, if we want to address our youth to have opportunity to live and to thrive, because comes together everything, education, health. If you don't have a place for them to live, and significantly, my community was dreaming about this for years and years, and they never had this opportunity. This first generation, give them hope, give them the American dream that we talked about it. Let's be serious and support this bill. I can bring hundreds of people can testify for this bill, including my sister, who live in America since 1990 and have 6 kids, and she never dreamed about having an opportunity to own home. Now she's living the American dream with her kids. There's so many single moms who never had an opportunity because they live paycheck to paycheck, and they could not come up with a down payment. But this gives them opportunity for them to put it down. So colleagues, both sides, if we want to address the housing crisis, this bill will give opportunity to address that. Thank you very much.
Representative Rayrauer.
Thank you so much, Chair Howard. Thank you for bringing this bill forward, Representative Agbaje. If there's one bill to fund in housing this session, it is this one. Today, while as Representative Hussein shared, thank you so much, white households have approximately a 77% home ownership rate in Minnesota. The rate for Black households is 29%. That is a massive disparity. This is directly due to a history of policies in Minnesota that actively encouraged white home ownership while actively preventing Black home ownership. And I'm happy to share this history outside of committee. I believe everyone should be able to reach the American dream of owning their own home and in turn with that, build generational wealth for their family and their future descendants. When you make the decisions, Chair Howard and Chair Igo, I encourage you to support and include this bill at the end. And thank you again, Representative Agbaje.
Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair Howard. And before I get into my comments, I just kind of want to ask a few clarifying questions. So I know that Ms. Larson might need to come up, but I want to know how much of this pot of money is left that isn't encumbered. I know it's kind of hard to track, so I figured I'd just ask our testifier who's here.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll have MMCDC come back and they can talk about the numbers.
Right.
Ms. Larson.
Hello. On our website at firstgendpa.org, we have a community impact page that will show that on a monthly basis. Right now, we have 60% of funds available.
Okay.
Meaning that they are not reserved, committed, or closed.
And can I ask, when did the program go live?
We signed our contract with Minnesota Housing in May 2024. We closed our first loan in June 2024.
Okay.
So 8 months.
Got it. Chair Igo.
So just a quick follow-up. So then that's 60% left of the 50 million, just so I've got the right pot of money.
100 million.
100 million. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just clarify, Chair, if I can.
Yes, go ahead.
There were like 2 pots of money out of the program last year, so it was 100 million to MMCDC, I believe, and then 50 million to the agency. And the agency has spent all of their funds already, so the remaining are through MMCDC.
Thank you, Chair. And that's just the information I wanted to clear up because I know there's 2 separate pots out there and each ones were encumbered differently. So I just want to make sure I had that right for the record. I guess my follow-up is just kind of looking at when we were putting together these loans, what percent down did it usually end up? Like what's the median percent down that families were having to do to purchase these homes? Because I'm sure we are partnering them with other opportunities and stuff that already exist in the mortgage markets and housing markets.
Representative Agbaje.
Chair Howard, I'll ask Ms. Larson if she has more data, but my understanding is that because a lot of it was paired with other funding, so I think this program probably provided anywhere from maybe like a third to half of what the down payment they needed was. But if Ms. Larson has more data on that, like how much was paired with other programs or how much of the down payment assistance it covered?
Ms. Larson.
On a conventional loan, it can be the full down payment. On a FHA loan, the borrower would still need to provide 3.5% of their own funds.
Okay.
Because the funds cannot be used on an FHA to pay that down payment, but otherwise it would be 100%, up to 100%. And I think on that chart I sent around, it showed what the average amount is, 10% of the purchase price up to $32,000.
Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair. And the reason I asked the question is because if you look at like the median home price and then you look at the median down payment assistance loan amount, factoring in if there was no outside money, that means that only 8.7% was getting put down. So I was just trying to visualize and put numbers together to see how we're leveraging other programs that exist when these loans are happening. So that's what I'm trying to get some clarification on.
Yeah, we tried to do the 10% to help eliminate mortgage insurance on conventional loans, to lower it enough so that that can drop away quicker than a full 5% down loan, that kind of thing. So that was the initial thought on how to do it. With the funds that we have available now, we are projecting that these funds will be reserved, committed, or closed by the end of this year. Reservations might not close, of course, in 2025 because borrowers have 90 days with a reservation to search for a home. Once they sign a purchase agreement, it becomes a commitment, and then once they close, it's closed on.
Chair Igo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions. Again, just trying to like clear all that up. So again, I think all of us as members can understand how this money moves because it's not like it's simple math, right? There's a lot that's going into making sure these funds go out. And it's good to know that there's still money in the pot because again, I need to hit on the note again. We have a deficit problem, and knowing that we at least have money there right now is a good thing. I see the merits and the detriments to down payment assistance in 2 ways, right? It helps people get into homes that historically haven't been able to, and I think that's a really, really good thing. I think all of us think that's a really good thing. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of down payment assistance is it doesn't really help us build new homes, and in some instances, that actually can inflate the cost of homes around it with competitiveness. So I see merits, I see detriments, but I think a lot of times they balance each other out in kind of a yin and yang approach. So I appreciate the conversation, the bill in front of us. I am glad to hear that there's still money there because I think in conversations as we look to agree on a budget moving forward, asks like these are really, really hard. But I understand both sides of the coin on this one, and we'll be doing what we can to keep programs like these in mind, but just appreciate the bill and the conversation.
I'll make a few comments and just thank Representative Agbaje for her work in pioneering this bill that's already making a huge difference for so many Minnesotans. And it makes sense, I believe, for us to continue to seek some of these changes to make sure that it's really maximizing its impact as we continue to erase what Representative Rierauer and Representative Hussein mentioned, which is one of the nation's worst racial home ownership gaps. And so thank you for your leadership on this issue generally and for bringing the bill forward. To the any final words?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members, for the discussion. Yes, I definitely fully agree. We have a lot to consider in front of us. I am glad that there is still some funding left in the program as well. I think that that's really helpful. But one of the things we've known is that this funding does go quite quickly. And so I think it behooves us to think about, again, where do we want to put most of our impact? Where do we want our investment to count the most? I think this is one of those places, and so I encourage your consideration of this while you're putting the budget bill together. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that, I will lay House File 999 over for possible inclusion. That concludes our business today. Our next hearing will be Wednesday. Chair Igo, any words about the agenda coming up? We'll just wait and get really excited for tomorrow. With that, we are adjourned.